Welcome to the Wellness Connection podcast with Fiona Kane. I'm your host, Fiona Kane, and today my guest is Khadine Aharon. Hi, Khadine.
Hi, how are you, Fiona? So good to be here.
I'm well, thank you. Now, for those who don't know you, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Oh, thanks, Fiona. So I'm Khadine, obviously. I'm a accredited social worker and I specialise in EFT, tapping, emotional freedom techniques with my clients. I tend to work with trauma and phobias, anxiety, other life challenges, and I also
Mm.
provide training in emotional freedom techniques. I'm also a foster carer for cats, for traumatized cats. So I use all my skills with cats as well.
Mm. Great. I've never heard of people talking about treating traumatized cats before, so it's always interesting. I love chatting to people and hearing about the different things they do because there's so many things that I didn't know were even there.
Oh, absolutely. And it's great when you can help a little being that doesn't have a home or someone that
Mm.
loves them and help to get them to a place where they can be adopted and they can
Yes.
live a happy life rather than live on the streets.
Yeah, and it's actually good to know that there's services like that there. There's people who can do those things because you just don't know what you don't know. And I just, yeah, that's really interesting. It's a little side note, but I thought that was
Yeah,
interesting.
look, there's great rescue services out there. Like with everything, there's not so great ones. I foster
Yes,
with a mini kitty commune, and they're fantastic. They supply me all the food. They pay for all
yes,
the vet bills. They have the highest level of care for their cats,
yes.
and yeah, they're a great organisation.
So what were they called again?
Mini kitty commune.
Okay, and they're in Sydney somewhere or in the Blue
They're based
Mountains?
in
Or?
Sydney and Canberra, and
Mhm.
then they have another branch called Ark and Animal Rescue Cooperative. So they get donations from all over the place and then they spread out all the donations to all the different rescue groups. So when we had all the flooding, was it last year? I can't remember. I've lost track of time now.
Yeah,
You
there's
know,
been so many.
they were off sending food and things that pets needed
Mm,
or wildlife needed during that time. So they're
mm,
great organisations,
yeah,
absolutely.
great. So the reason that I got you on today is I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your story, your sort of your health story.
Sure.
It's a bit of sounds like a bit of a complicated story, but I'd be really interested to hear a little bit about. I know you can tell me where does it begin? Where does your story begin? Tell me a little bit about your story and you know what's happened for you and really ultimately where you're at now. So you start at any place that you feel is relevant to you.
Yeah, sure. So when I was 25, I was actually providing training in massage therapy. I was a massage practitioner.
Mm,
And one day during, I think it was a neck massage, I had this massive anxiety attack. I'd never had one before. And within a month, I pretty much couldn't work. I went from a 50-hour week doing massage and training to if I did the dishes, I wouldn't be able to do anything for the rest of the day. So I had
wow.
really complete emotional and physical crash. I was
Mm,
told I'd probably never work again.
mm,
As time went by, I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, and complex post traumatic stress disorder. I'd had a
wow.
very interesting childhood and it had all caught up with me essentially.
Mm.
And I had a huge crash. And
Must have been very frightening.
it was because I was very active at that time. I'd be massaging through the week, the weekends would come, and I'd go for day long bushwalks by myself. Or I'd be going to the park and just playing basketball. And I was highly active. And then all of a sudden, I couldn't do anything. And I had to find meaning in life, not being able to actively use my body.
Mm,
And it was very challenging. And to go from a 50-hour week to not being able to do much, it was really hard.
mm,
And I lost everything pretty much. I mean, I
mm,
no longer run my business. What I did do as part of my coping initially is I enrolled for a training at TAFE in community services welfare because I knew that I couldn't just do nothing and kind
mm,
of stay sane. I
Mm.
knew that I had to keep myself stimulated. So I would fall asleep in class. It took me twice as long to finish. During that time, I also got a virus in my eyes, so I couldn't see for 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Um, and that was a really interesting time. It was, one of the biggest lessons then was to learn to accept help. It was very hard for me to even consider asking for help, but I really had to learn that when you can't see. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, you really have to. But thankfully, I had a really great GP and friends that were really supportive. But
Mm.
it took me twice as long to get through TAFE, but I did, falling
Yeah.
asleep in class and all. And I got distinctions, which was the highest at TAFE. And then I thought, well, what's next?
Mm.
And by this time, I was already in regular counselling, obviously, but it really wasn't helping the post traumatic stress disorder at all. And not much, either medically or naturally, was helping my health at all. I
Mm.
pretty much lost hope for any improvement. And I got to uni, and some silly person told me uni was easier than TAFE. I don't know what they were thinking, but I went from distinctions to failing. And it would take 10 attempts to read a single sentence in any of my readings.
Mm.
And I knew something was really wrong with my brain. It felt like there was just this really dense fog and bits of information floating around. It was so hard just to pick one bit and then
Mm.
somehow link it to the next bit. And I remember chatting to my GP at the time. He had no idea what could possibly be going on because there's very little understanding really about fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome in those days. And one day I came across this MRI study that compared healthy brains to the brains of people living with fibromyalgia. I thought this would be interesting. And
Mm.
it was. And what they had shown that when people live with fibromyalgia, they have on average 8 to 12% reduction in grey matter. And they
Wow.
hypothesized that that was due to high cortisol levels. This was before everyone knew about cortisol.
Which is
Nowadays,
a stress hormone for anyone who's not sure.
yeah, it's a stress
Mm.
hormone. And these
Mm.
days, if you're in the health and well-being industry, you know about cortisol. We know so much
Yes.
more about it. But in those days, none of my lecturers had even heard about it.
Mm.
And so I thought, wow, okay, so that's what's happening. I've got too much cortisol and I need to reduce it. So I went on a mission to reduce it, and I found natural ways to reduce it. At the
Mm.
time, I had a GP, and he was very open minded. And he said, "Oh, I just went to this conference about chronic fatigue, and they suggest testing your cortisol and your DHEA,
Mhm. Which is another hormone.
which is another hormone. So cortisol's high, DHEA can be really low. My DHEA was really low at that time, and I would lose hours sitting on my lounge not knowing where time went.
Mm.
And it'd be very easy to put that down to just dissociating because of my trauma.
Mm.
Yet once he gave me the compounded script for DHEA, within a month, I've never needed it again, and I've never been like that again.
Okay. So that helped you correct those cortisol levels then?
Yes, well, it
Mm.
certainly helped to increase the DHEA because when that's low, then we get really depressed.
Mm.
Um,
Definitely.
and so it helped to create that harmony.
Mm.
And I've never needed that intervention again. So
Mm.
that was really helpful. And not many people know about that
Mm.
when we're talking about chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or trauma.
Mm.
All of those health challenges can have issues with those stress hormones. And it's not
Yes.
often talked about. And so I like to make people aware of that because it's very simple saliva testing that we can do
Mm.
to find out about that.
Yes.
So that
Yeah.
was really helpful for me. But I also started meditating before I went to sleep to help me to get into a deep sleep faster because
Mm.
when you have fibromyalgia, you often aren't getting your deep sleep.
Yeah, on that note, actually, for anyone who doesn't know what fibromyalgia is or what it looks like or what it feels like, can you just give us a bit of more detail about that in case that word is a bit unfamiliar
Sure.
for people?
Yeah. So fibromyalgia is essentially a neuroimmune type of condition. It affects your nervous system. So your body perceives pain about 10 times the norm. You can become sensitive to lights and sounds, but also affects your hormones. And so you're going to have a whole lot of hormonal challenges, which I certainly
Mhm.
have over the years, and it impacts your immune system. So really it's multi-systemic. When something impacts your nervous system and your hormones, essentially it impacts your whole system.
Yes.
And you can become extremely tired with it. And with me, because I had chronic fatigue syndrome as well, I certainly got
Mm.
very tired. But the main symptom with fibromyalgia is high levels of pain throughout the whole body. So it's never in one place to fit the criteria for fibromyalgia. You have to have it in all four quadrants. So if you just split
Mhm.
your body into four, has to be in all four quadrants of your body for an extended amount of time.
Okay.
And yeah, depending what guidelines, which country guidelines, but if the Canadian ones are the most progressive, uh, you need to have an impact on your immune system as well to fit that criteria.
Okay. All right. And so that affects your sleep, one, I imagine, because of the pain, but also because it messes up the hormones. Tell me a little bit about the sleep issue with it.
Yes, it also impacts the sleep. There's still a lot they don't know about why it impacts the sleep so much. So I can't totally answer that. But they do know with fibromyalgia, often you don't get enough deep sleep. And it's not just
Mm.
because of the pain, because sometimes, yes, the pain can wake you up, but
Mm.
sometimes it's just that your brain doesn't go into that deep sleep.
Mm.
So even if you're sleeping a lot, you're not getting the regeneration. So then when you wake up, if you're tired and you're in more pain because your body hasn't been able to regenerate during the
Yes.
nighttime.
Mm.
And so it's like a vicious circle, really. Yeah.
Mm. Okay. And then so you were talking about what you were doing that was helping you with the sleep, and I think you started talking about, was it meditation that you were talking about
I used
before?
to listen to meditations at night time, just the visualization ones, as
Mm.
I would as I'd go to sleep. I used to use CDs. It's better for you than your phone, by the way, rather than having all those waves near your head.
Yeah, head, yeah.
And I'd go to sleep that way. So that was one of my strategies. Uh, but spending time in nature and grounding,
Mhm.
grounding helps us to reduce our stress hormone levels and our anxiety. And so I found a range of natural ways. Getting enough sunlight is really important. If you're unwell, often you don't go outside to get sunlight.
Yes.
And we really need that sunlight, particularly in the morning without our glasses on, so that we're getting the full spectrum of sunlight. And
Yeah,
so,
that's part of how our bodies make melatonin, for those out there listening who are unsure about that, and melatonin is a sleep hormone. So,
yes,
essentially, we have this sleep-wake cycle that is controlled by hormones, and having time in the sunshine without your sunglasses on is part of it.
absolutely. It's really essential to our health. And I think we've become so informed about slip, slop, slap. We're not
Yes.
really taught how to go into the sun safely
Yes.
for our own skin type. There was an app
Mm.
that I found that my optometrist actually recommended me, and it was free, called D-Minder. And you put in your skin type and how much your skin is exposed, how much skin is exposed, and it will tell you exactly how much time you can spend in the sun on that day
Okay.
based on
D-minder, did you say?
your
D-minder.
D-Minder.
Okay. I'll have to look that up.
Really handy app. But I tend to go swimming or walking from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. So I'm still getting
Okay.
the later, gentler sunlight.
Yes.
But I'm not worrying about having to put sunblocks on because they're full of chemicals. I'm sensitive to chemicals.
Yes.
And they're not great for if I swim in fresh water. So if you're swimming in fresh water, it's best not to wear sunblock because it can harm the native wildlife in the water.
Yeah, so it's just about the time of day that you go into the water that's
Day,
important. Mm.
time of day, that's
Yeah.
right.
Mm. And it's not back in the '80s. I don't know about you, not quite sure what age you're at, but I know for me, certainly I was in my teenage years then, and we used to sort of cover ourselves with coconut oil and
Coconut oil, yeah.
sunbake in the 40-degree days, and we literally roasted ourselves. So we're not
Used to
advocating for that.
No, people used to intentionally get burnt.
Mm.
We must be
Yes.
in the same age group. I'm about to turn 52. So, yeah, people
Yeah.
intentionally got burnt to get a tan. in
Yeah,
those.
yeah, I'm 52 as well, and now I spend a lot of time at the skin cancer clinics getting my skin checked with my Irish skin. It just really wasn't a good idea. So just clarifying, we are not advocating for that. However, we do need some sunshine,
Yes,
and that app sounds like a great way of knowing what's right for you and your skin and that kind of thing.
yeah. I found that really helpful.
Mm.
And so from failing at uni, I did get through uni, took me twice as long
Well
again.
done.
Yeah,
Congratulations. That is, I mean, that's an achievement anyway, but it's a huge achievement when you've got all of those other things going on, all of the
yeah,
fatigue and the brain fog and all and the pain and all the things you've been talking about. That's a mighty achievement. So I just want to sort of
thank you.
remind you that is huge in itself. Well
And
done.
I had to really struggle for the right to even
Mm,
study part-time at uni because
mhm.
you think social work was all about access and equity.
Yep.
They would have that. But at that time, that was not an option at the uni
Yes.
I went to. So I had to really push for that. But I did graduate and I ended up with first class honours. So reducing the cortisol, it worked. It wasn't
Impressive.
easy. It was still torture, and I'd never go back to uni because I just don't want to put my brain through that torture.
Yes. Yeah.
I really prefer practical learning anyway. But
Mm.
I did graduate. I did get first class honours. So it is possible for anyone out there who's experienced something similar. It totally is possible.
Yes. Yeah.
When I left uni, I was online again. I came across this thing called EFT, and I thought, well, what's that?
Mm,
And I just knew I had to learn it. And so I remember the first EFT training I went, like they're highly practical. And I worked on an event I thought I'd totally done in the years of counselling.
mm,
At this stage, my PTSD, my experience of it was still really uncomfortable. My anxiety was still very high. Not much had really changed at this stage after all those years. And my first training, I worked on this event. I thought I'd totally done, had no emotions thinking about it. But once we started the process, my
mm.
body started responding. All these emotions were coming up. The trainer had to get a bin because I thought I was going to vomit. I thought, wow, I thought I'd totally done that one in counselling.
Yes.
Thought I'd
Yeah.
totally done that. And the next day, when I sat in the sunlight, because all the cells in my body were starting to wake up and they were dancing to the sunlight, as weird as that sounds. But that lasted 3 days. I thought,
Wow.
EFT can do that for me. How can I use it with other people?
Mm,
And so I certainly used it a lot for my health
mm,
and for my own trauma. And that's been like the biggest changer trauma wise for me
mm.
and for my health. Because if we release the trauma from our body, then our body's in a better position to heal itself.
Yeah, we don't realize that, trauma is not just something that's in your mind or in memories and things, it's actually in your body.
In
And
your body.
so, emotions and trauma are in our body, so physical touch or movement, or you can tell us a bit more about EFT as well, but those things are an important part of it as well because things just talking about it is not the whole solution. We do need some sort of energy or body treatment, or movement or something. So, but for those who don't know what EFT means, what it stands for, what it is, can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. So EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. That's techniques, not technique, because it's a whole range of techniques. So if you're looking at it online, generally you just see the very basics of EFT.
Mhm.
And the basics are great because you can learn to do them on yourself really
Yes.
easily for self regulation or to work on your own challenges to a
Mhm.
minor level. And then there's the more advanced techniques that you would do with a practitioner to work on significant traumas or to change beliefs or to resolve phobias or
Mm.
to work on cravings, for example.
Mhm.
It's a very flexible tool. It
Yes.
does reduce cortisol by about 37%. So
Okay.
it was a part of my passion about reducing cortisol, Janie. And it's
Mm.
such an easy way to reduce cortisol
'Cause
because
this is the tapping, you're talking about the tapping techniques,
yeah,
aren't you? That's what you're talking about. Just again clarifying, because some people listening to this might be all over it and others maybe just have never heard of it before and have no idea what you're talking about. So, it's not anything invasive or painful or anything like that. So, I just wanted to, ensure that
so with
it's,
EFT,
understood.
yeah, what it combines the Western knowledge of psychology with the Eastern knowledge of the meridian system. Well, these
Mhm.
days, a lot of people saw that as airy fairy energy stuff. But these
Mm.
days, with the latest technology, we can actually see the meridians, and they call it the primovascular system in your body.
Okay.
And so we can actually see them now. So
Mm.
they're not just this energy thing.
Yes, yeah, like once upon a time where bacteria people couldn't see bacteria. What are you cleansing your knife for or your equipment for, or your surgical equipment, what
Or
is these
washing
little
your
things that
hands
you're
for.
talking about?
That's right. That's
We
right.
couldn't see them, so we didn't believe in them, but yeah, now more and more we're getting more technology that we can see the things that we kind of, a lot of people had already known that they were there, but, yeah, not everyone believed it because they couldn't see it.
That's right. A lot of ancient cultures have had all this knowledge, and we haven't believed it because we couldn't see it. And yet now we're getting technology where we can see it.
Mm,
And so EFT, it is a mind body technique. It works on the mind and the body at the same time. And
mm,
that's one of the reasons why it's so powerful. It's
mm.
also great because people don't need to share their stories. So when
Okay.
we're sharing our stories all the time, it just wires our brain into that trauma.
Mm,
And often, who wants to share their really traumatic stories?
mm.
Honestly, like
Yeah,
who wants to do that? I
yeah.
know I still have experiences that I don't want to talk about. But in EFT, we focus on emotions and physical sensations. So we don't actually need to know the details, which is great for clients. And it's great for us as practitioners because it maintains our longevity as practitioners.
Yes, yeah, and I think that that's I just, it's really, really important, that point, because I think that by the time a person gets to that place where they've experienced whatever traumas and pain and experiences they've had, that and often people have tried lots of different things and they've had therapies and they've done different things, and not saying that all of those other things haven't, sometimes it's a multiple things that work. It's not so much that this didn't work or that didn't work, but it's the cumulative effect of all things.
Absolutely.
And sometimes things haven't worked as well. It's both. But I think it's important for people who are sort of maybe thinking about this to kind of say, look, it's just that's the good thing about it. It's kind of non-threatening because you're not having to bring up your trauma. You're not having to share that trauma, and it's just simple tapping, which is not invasive. So there's nothing scary about it, and threatening about it. So there's the I just think it's good to understand that, because I think that I know that in the past when I've talked to different people about different options they might want to try for their health, people can be very fearful about the things they don't understand or they don't know, or about something that might traumatize them more or be really scary or whatever it is. Or a lot of people with anxiety, which is a lot of these sorts of people, are the ones that suffer from anxiety. This is all very scary. So I just think it is good to clarify that and just really emphasize that yeah, you don't need to re-traumatize yourself. It's not about that at all.
That's right. And it can be, working on our trauma is scary.
Mm,
And that's why working with a really uh, qualified and skilled practitioner, if you have significant trauma, is really important to not
mm,
just tap along online,
yes.
because emotions and memories can come up while you're tapping. So, really important if you do have significant trauma to work with a really skilled practitioner who will work at your pace, not their pace,
Okay.
and who will prepare you for working on specific events. So, generally, I always teach my students to start very surface level, and then we slowly work deeper and deeper. And we have all different techniques to do that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mm. And so that's what you found has been one of the major things for you in regards to sort of managing your health and getting yourself back on track?
absolutely. EFT has been the big changer for me in
Mm,
regards to the post traumatic stress itself. Kinesiology has also been wonderful for
mhm,
me. Uh, Different naturopaths at different times have been great.
mm,
When I first had my crash, I pretty much couldn't tolerate any food as well. And I would, I would remember I was putting on weight, and my GP said, "Well, you're just having too much calories." And I'd go to the dietitian, and she'd say, look at my food diet and say, "Oh, your diet's really low in sugar, it's really low in fat, and you're doing low GI really well. You must watch your chocolate intake." And I had to laugh at her because my chocolate intake was one piece of the darkest Lindt chocolate you could buy a day. And
Wow.
she was
Okay,
saying,
that was worth noting.
yeah, and she was blaming it on that one piece of chocolate. Yet I went to a naturopath and they do all this testing on a computer,
Mm,
tells you what how your body's reacting to different things. So whether it's good, whether it's overstimulating or understimulating. And when I had that testing, I wasn't tolerating a lot of food at all.
mm,
And so what was happening, my body wasn't absorbing any nutrients. And so I would feel sick every time I ate and I'd have massive headaches every day. And yeah, I
mm.
was gaining weight because my body wasn't able to assimilate the food properly.
Yeah.
And so that naturopath, she got me eating again. I can eat most things these days. And so
Mm,
different practitioners have been very helpful. I go to GPs, but even they admit there's not much that they can do for me
mm.
when it comes to
Yeah.
my specific health challenges.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they've been helpful, say, with the DHEA. Yeah, that was a life changer in itself to have that
Yes.
and to have that
And just
support.
being monitored, like someone who can just do the basic, basic blood tests and urine tests, saliva tests, whatever. Not saying that naturopaths and other people can't do those tests, but in Australia, a lot of those tests are covered by Medicare through your GP. So it can be really handy to have a GP just keeping an eye on it all from a overall perspective. But then sure, go and have those therapies elsewhere because like you said, there's only so much they can do.
That's right. And it's important to have a GP who's open minded to you doing natural stuff in combination with however they can help you. A good
Yes.
GP will acknowledge when they can't help you
Mm.
as well
Yes.
as when they can. And
Yes.
I'm very fortunate to have a GP who does that and he will support
Yeah.
me. Like when I was having a lot of trouble sleeping, he actually advised me to go and have some herbs. He didn't try and give me a sleeping pill. He advised me to go
Yes.
and have some herbs to help, and that actually did help to a degree. And
Mm.
so I think it comes down to having a team, and sometimes that team will change. And for me, over the years, I've had so many different therapies, and different ones have helped in different ways.
Mm.
But certainly, EFT with a really great practitioner, kin- kinesiology with really good kinesiologists, and
Mm.
help with either really super naturopaths or nutritionists have been great for me.
Mm.
So I'm on a metabolic program at the moment, and for that, I had to have a range of blood tests, and my naturopath sent the results somewhere, and I got a personalized package which tells me exactly what foods I can have. And that
Mm.
was actually really great for me because I used to be bloated all over, and it was impossible to release weight no matter what program I went on. And I did release, 8 kilos on that.
Okay.
And it made it very clear what I could eat. And so I
Yes.
wasn't getting sick when I ate. And in that way, it made it easier for me. And sometimes it's just we have to go to different people until we find the right person for us and at that particular time because our needs change throughout time.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that that's exactly it. What I've seen with personally with myself and with many of my clients is exactly that. That there's in these situations they're usually complicated situations. A lot of these health issues there's complicated things behind how they begun, and once they begin, often it's like you said, they're multi-system things. There's lots going on, so to think that there's going to be one answer, it's just, I think that's very rarely ever the case. But what there
Abs-
is there's lots of strategies, and there's lots of small answers, and there's lots of small steps, and that cumulative thing, and there might be things that are the things that the bigger shifts happen from this thing or from that thing or whatever. But, it's like if you like you was getting the DHEA from the GP, and it was different things that you learned from your naturopath, or, the doctor told you to use herbs for your sleep, or the EFT, it's all of the things. And like you said, different times, different strategies. And I think that sometimes when we have chronic health issues, we're so overwhelmed with it, and we just want someone to fix us.
That's
And I understand that. However, I think it's it's a journey, and it's a journey that requires lots of little steps along the way. And sometimes you go forwards, and sometimes you fall backwards, and it's a bit like snakes and ladders, really. You get going up and fall down and whatever. And I think that once you understand that, you can be kinder to yourself around it, more compassionate to yourself, and have more patience around it.
absolutely.
Whereas if you think it's the thing, and I've got to find the thing, and it's going to be just going to this one person, this one naturopath, this one doctor is going to just cure me. I think you'd be very disappointed, and be very find yourself feeling very frustrated a lot of the time if you think that that's the answer.
Absolutely. If you have complex health conditions, we kind of have to become our own specialist.
Mm,
And we can't treat anybody else like God and just
mm,
go along with everything that one doctor or one specialist or one naturopath
mm.
says, because we're all different. And
Yes.
every practitioner we go to, they come from their own lens, they have their own
Mm.
expertise. So
Yes.
different practitioners have their own lens and expertise, which is why we have to become our own specialists, because we know ourselves best.
Mm.
And if we just
Yes.
follow what everybody else says and take it for gospel, then often we get no result, or we could go backwards.
Mm.
And that's why we need to listen to ourselves first and
Yeah.
have an open mind to try different things, because everyone has that expertise. Like, I know you have a lot of expertise in nutrition, and
Yes.
we've had discussions when we've met before
Mm.
about this. And people will say, oh, yeah, go gluten free. But sometimes gluten free is not a
So
healthy option either when you buy processed gluten free stuff.
no, not if
And
you walk down the supermarket aisle and buy all the gluten-free junk food. Junk food's still junk food, whether it's gluten-free or not.
it's confusing. A muesli bar is still junk food.
Yes, yeah.
And I think, the whole food topic can be so confusing. And I know for people like me, like, I used to eat what other people would say is really healthy and
Mm,
still struggle. And yet when I go alternatively, where they do a whole range of blood tests that are very thorough, or the saliva testing or the computer testing, which says exactly what's happening for my body, well, it's a whole
mm,
different story. What's healthy for one person isn't necessarily healthy for another person. Like, I can't have
yeah.
anything from the cabbage family, for example, on
Yes, yeah.
mine. In fact, there's not many vegetables that actually agree with me at the moment.
Yes, yeah,
But if you
and
don't know, you could be having lots of salads.
yeah, exactly. And, and generally speaking, when the more your gut is compromised, the often the more that you won't be able to cope with sort of lots of vegetables and things.
Yeah.
And the more you heal your gut, the more you can. But again, it's complicated. And I think this is something I go on about all the time, because people get very religious about nutrition. And
Yes.
I don't think it's something to get religious about. Your actual religion, that's a separate thing. That's your own business. But nutrition is a science, and simply it's about what's working for you and what works for the individual, and what works for the individual at that time. Because what worked for you last year might not be what works this year. So rather than get all kind of because and also if people find something that works, they can get quite religious about this thing works, just so it works for everybody, and or it's going to work forever. And it's worked for you now. It might work for you for 5 years, 1 year, the rest of your life. I don't know. And it may or may not work for someone else, but that's okay. It's
Absolutely.
individual.
Yeah. And that's why I try and say to people, "Oh, it's great that being a vegetarian works for you. I prefer to eat as a vegetarian, but I actually need meat. I actually do
Yeah.
better with it." And we're all different, and our bodies change. There was a time when I couldn't tolerate meat, for
Mm.
example. I couldn't
Yes.
eat it without being sick. but now
Mm.
I know that I actually feel better when I do have it. And so our needs change. And whatever health condition that we have, that we live with, it's a
Mm.
chronic health condition, our needs aren't going to be stagnant. The more we do
Yes.
to improve our health, then
Mm.
our body will change and adapt, and we'll have different needs through that journey. And I think it's really important to see it as a journey.
Yes. Yeah, I think that the sooner that we get to a place where we see it as a journey and we learn to listen to our body, the more healing that you can have. Because when we're in that kind of, fixed place of we must find the cure and, and this is going to be the answer. And then every time something isn't the answer, there's this big letdown and there's this big, and I've seen that like that happened. I know that's happened for myself, but I've seen that happen to other people as well. Is
Yeah,
the mindset is a really, really big part of this, and understanding the way to approach it is really,
absolutely.
really important. And something that you've said a few times throughout this is you've talked about listening to your body. You've talked about sort of noticing and the signs and symptoms and or what you needed or what was working for you. So do you want to just talk a little bit about that? That's just the listening
Yeah,
to your body.
yeah, sure. So
Mm,
before I had my health crash, I couldn't listen to my body because I was totally numb physically and emotionally. So
mhm,
when I had my crash, I went from not feeling any pain to extreme pain. So and I just couldn't really tolerate anything.
mm,
But as time went by, and particularly with EFT, because when we're doing EFT, we start to uh, be able to associate different emotions more and be able to feel what's happening in our body more
mm,
the more we do it.
mm,
I had to start listening. So, okay, so the doctors told me to have this thing, but
mm,
I'm not reacting well to it. So I better go to the doctor and saying that's actually making me worse. And
mm.
let's put that on my list of things not to have. I remember I had a pain medication once and it was a sustained release once. It made me trip for 12 hours.
Wow.
I was
Yeah.
at the women's basketball game. I couldn't follow the game. It was like, it was the weirdest experience.
Yes.
When it comes to eating food, sometimes it can be hard to listen to our bodies because we start to crave the things that are really bad for us.
Mm,
And that's where I actually needed help first. And
mm,
now that I'm having foods that actually suit my body, I know when I'm having something that my body doesn't like because then I feel unwell after it or I'll get a migraine after it. Whereas when I'm sticking to my program, that doesn't happen.
mm. Yeah. Yeah,
It's
that's my experience. When you tune in, your body just starts to very quickly tell you what's working and what's not, and then you can just adjust things. But
that's
when
right.
you first start paying attention, it can be quite overwhelming and confusing. But it is worth doing because it's actually the listening that allows you to guide your healing, I think, or it's part of your ability to guide your healing. Because how can you guide your healing if you don't know what's going on?
Absolutely. And
Mm,
I think a big part of that is learning to trust your intuition. If you've
mm,
experienced, say, a lot of trauma, you might not trust your intuition.
yes.
And so a great way to start doing that, I learned, was in the morning when I get dressed to to ask my higher self, what do I wear today, and go with that no matter what,
Mm,
no matter what,
mm,
and pick that out of my wardrobe and wear that. And that's a really easy way to start following our intuition. And for
mm,
me, I follow that when it comes to what do I need right now if I'm in a lot of pain or if I'm not feeling well, what do I need right now? And I'll go with the first thing that comes to my mind.
mm.
Last week, I think it was last week, I lose track of time. I didn't know the Mind Body Spirit Festival was on again. And I woke up and it just popped up on my phone like, I'm going today.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
was there. I didn't buy anything, but I did a training a few years ago and they had a stall there. And I just knew I needed that therapy that day. And after
Mm,
months of being in agony, I had a treatment with them and I had zero pain for 3 days. I was so happy. And I have
yes.
pain now than then. But if I hadn't followed my intuition, I wouldn't have thought about going there, because I really haven't thought about that therapy since I attended the training.
Yeah, yeah. So really it's connecting in with our body, connecting in with our, whether you call it soul or whether you call it your intuition or that inner part of you, whatever however you describe it, it's really up to you. But connecting with that inner part of you is really, really important. I
Yes.
actually wanted to share with you, there's a singer, artist who I've been really obsessed with this year. Anyone who watches and listens to this podcast will know. His name is Ren, and he has experienced a lot of. He had a tick bite, and he had Lyme disease, and so he's had all of the chronic fatigue and all of the what's it called now? But the brain inflammation and all of those awful
The
things. So,
nervous system issues come with
yeah,
Lyme
so
disease.
a lot of stuff you were talking about, and he's a creator, so he's always got stuff coming out, whatever, and he's struggled with with his brain issues and with getting stuck and not being able to not being able to think straight, and he was in bed for many years and all of the rest of it. But he at the end of he has a song called High Ren, which is well worth watching, and at the very end, it's a bit confronting though, so just be aware of that. Be Do it when you're feeling emotionally up for it. But at the end, he talks about, he does like a spoken word section. And just one of the paragraphs he says, I'm just going to read this paragraph to you. He says, it was never really a battle for me to win, it was an eternal dance. And like a dance, the more rigid I became, the harder it got. The more I cursed my clumsy footsteps, the more I struggled. So I got older and I learned to relax and I learned to soften, and that dance got easier.
Mm. I love that. I love that so much, because we need to find a peace within that darkness. Like all
Yeah.
those years ago, when I had my crash and I could no longer do the things that I wanted to do, I still can't do a lot of those things yet. I can now go paddleboarding and I can kayak and I can walk as long as it's pretty flat. I can
Yeah.
walk for hours. I
Yeah.
struggle a bit up hills, but
Mm.
I've regained a lot of those things, and I found joy in other things.
Mm.
So it
Yeah.
opened up other interests for me.
Mm.
And it also led to the work that I do now. Would I
Mm.
be doing what I do now if I hadn't experienced that? Probably not. And I wouldn't be
Yeah.
as good a practitioner or trainer as I am
If you
now.
hadn't. Yeah. And that's the thing, I think I find when you've been through trauma and pain, it's hard to understand that softening is going to be helpful for you.
Yes.
But softening actually is helpful for you. And I like just the way he talks about the dance, because I think that's what it is. I think that the journey is learning how to connect with your body and how to dance in that body. And that also means being able to be flexible enough to kind of sway and go where you need to go. And this treatment, that treatment, what do I need today? What does self care look like today? That might be different to what self care looks like tomorrow. And it's just having that flexibility to kind of go with it, rather than this rigid sort of thing of this is how it should look and this is how it should be. And because that's just not true anymore. So you've got to create a new reality. And I think that a lot of the healing comes from that acceptance, and then it, being prepared to kind of just dance with it. So I just think that I've never seen anyone embody, just in language, embody the experience more than what I've seen with him, which is why I've really connected with him this year.
Yeah, I'll have to have a listen. It sounds
Yeah,
really, but yeah,
yeah.
it's really important. We can get very stuck in our pain or whatever
Mm,
symptoms our health condition is creating, and it's very easy to lose hope. I certainly did.
mm,
And yet we need to find ways to still find pleasure in life
yes. Yeah.
despite.
And
What,
sometimes it's just about the small things. It's just little things.
that's right. The
Yeah.
little things, like I can go out into the sun today. I can
Yes.
walk
Exactly.
across the road today. Like in the last lockdown, my pelvic floor went into spasm. I couldn't sit, stand, or walk for six
Yes.
months. When we were
Wow.
in one of the, and I was in one of the 5K restricted zones.
Okay.
And my joy was my foster cat at the time, Mr.
Mm,
Gorgeous. And he
okay.
kept me sane. We helped each other during that
Yes.
time. Um, we have to find joy in the little things. It's one of the reasons why I foster cats, because no matter what's happening with my health, I'm helping them, yes, but they give back so
Yeah.
much more. And so helping them is a part of my own healing at the
Mm.
same time, because it is a small thing that brings me joy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm very aware of time now, and so I'd just like to ask you: is there anything that you would like else that you would? I mean, what you said is great already, but is there anything else that you would like to add before we finish up?
Yeah, just for anyone who is struggling, persistence is the key. Being
Mm,
persistent and having an open mind to possibilities. Don't take on board one statement someone says. Like, I could have
mm,
taken on board, "You'll never work again,"
mm.
and just settled for that and
Yes.
promptly died. If I just took the word of one person, I'd still be stuck in bed.
Mm,
So persistence is key. Trying different things, seeing what works for you, having an
mm.
open mind, looking for the little things that bring you happiness and joy a little bit each day. For you, it might be
Yes.
going to touch a plant or just sitting on your balcony in the sunshine in the morning. And just that can make a huge difference. Just sunshine and grounding can make a
Yes.
massive difference to our well-being.
Yeah, just finding those moments.
Those
Yeah,
moments, yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Cardine. And if
Oh,
anyone wants to get in
happy.
contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
The easiest way is just to go to my website, embraceempowerment.com.
Okay, that was an embraceempowerment.com.
That's right. And all
Yes.
my details are there. That's the easiest way to find me.
Well, thanks again, Cardine. It was really great to hear your story and learn more about the things that you've found that have helped you. I think it's just really great to share these things so that people can start to see there's more than one option of how to manage our health.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Mm.
much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Fiona.
And thank you for those of you who are watching and listening. Please like, subscribe, and share. I really appreciate if you would do that. And I will see you all again next week. Thank you so much. Bye.
See you, everyone.